The time was 1 in the afternoon and I was on the road with my best friend Adam. We were driving to Adam's parents because they needed help with cleaning up the garage. They had an old fridge and several farm equipment that were too heavy to move on their own. 20 minutes into the drive, Adam and I both noticed a subtle change in the air. Let me stress that again, the change was very subtle. Kinda like using filters when you take photos. We both looked at each other with that WTF look on our faces. Everything looked the same, but at the same time, everything looked different. It's hard to explain in words, but let's put it this way. We drove on this road hundreds of times from as far as we can remember. We know the landscape is the same, but somehow the colors, or maybe the saturation of the colors, just weren't right. We drive another 2 minutes and see a diner that we had never seen before. I would have stopped if I had the alertness to do that, but I was so stumped that my brain froze for a moment. Then all of a sudden, everything goes back to normal again. I stopped the car on the side of the road and told Adam that we should go back to check the diner. We took the next exit, turned around, but the diner wasn't there anymore. We stopped the car at the exact spot where we saw the diner that wasn't supposed to exist. Then we began comparing notes. I told them about the things I saw, like the color of the diner, the 2 cars that were parked in front, and the name, which read Paul's Roadside Diner. At the end of the discussion, we came to a realization that we had seen the same things. If it was just me, then I'll be fine with people telling me that I had imagined everything. But how can 2 people see something that shouldn't exist in real life? And even more surprisingly, how could they see precisely the same thing? And here's the kicker of the whole experience. Right before leaving the spot at the diner, Adam got a text from his dad and saw that the time was nearly 3 in the afternoon. If you take away the 20 minutes of time to make a U-turn at an exit, come back to the spot, and the time that it took for us to finish our conversation, we were missing roughly an hour and 15 minutes of time. So what the heck happened? How did more than an hour of our time pass without us perceiving the flow of time? Where in the heck were we in those 75 minutes of missing time? I used to have a brown teddy bear as a best friend when I was a little girl. Mom gave it to me on a Christmas when I was 3, and I kept that in my bedroom even when I turned 18. I think it was just one of those items that I had for so long that it felt wrong not to have it around, to be seen every time I step into my bedroom. So the point is, I loved that teddy bear, but I no longer considered it my best friend once I got old enough to understand that people couldn't be best friends with stuffed animals. I took it with me when I went to college. My parents rented a small studio apartment for me, and I guess I didn't want to feel lonely. A year later, I had a boyfriend that they used to come over quite often. I used to smoke back then, and so did my ex-boyfriend. This one time, we got so drunk and almost set the apartment on fire when my boyfriend fell asleep with a lit cigarette in his hand and let go of it when it was totally out. Fortunately, we put out the small fire before it caused significant damage, but my teddy bear wasn't so lucky. Its entire top half was charred, but I still didn't have the heart to throw it out. It had a strong burnt odor, and so I ended up wrapping it with food wrapper and left it standing on my desk where it stood for more than a decade. A couple of weeks thereafter, I came home and my teddy bear had disappeared. I called my boyfriend and asked if he did anything to it, but his response really pissed me off because he argued that he had never seen a teddy bear in my apartment. As you might imagine, that conversation didn't end well. I was a little down but recovered within a few days. I had hoped to pass the teddy bear down to my daughter one day, if I had a daughter one day, that is. But then it got charred and now it was gone. Oh well, life goes on, I guess. Come summer, Mom and Dad picked me up from my apartment and I went back home where I would spend the next 2 months. I went upstairs to my room to unpack and I got startled big time. My freaking teddy bear was there, is what I thought initially, but it couldn't have been because it was still intact. I thought maybe mom had bought it for me, envisioning that I still think like a 6-year-old and would be ecstatic to see a shiny new one. I picked it up to take a closer look because it was so uncannily similar to my old teddy bear. But you know what? I began to feel frightened as I inspected it inch by inch. Then I got to the tag and just dropped the teddy bear like it was laced with poison. It had my signature on it. It was my writing and there was no mistake about it. This was my teddy bear, but somehow it was still intact without a single burn mark. I spoke to mom about it and she insists that I left the teddy bear in my room when I left for college. She doesn't know about the half-burned teddy because I'd be crazy to tell her what happened, so she thinks I'm only arguing the fact that I took it and yet it's somehow at home. So basically, she had no idea what the problem was, why I was arguing about it, and why I was being such a pain in the rear. So that was another conversation that didn't end well. But yeah, the teddy bear, I don't understand any of it. I don't get how my boyfriend swears that he never saw my teddy bear in my apartment, and even more insane is that he might be right because according to mom, I never took my teddy bear. As crazy as this statement might sound to you, I'm starting to question if I somehow ended up in a reality that's not of my own. The story which I'm about to tell you is something that happened to my wife and I didn't experience it firsthand. She's told me about this a couple months back and I thought it was the most bizarre thing ever. The story goes something like this. My wife quit her job 2 years after we got married because by then we had plans to have a baby. Her daily routine consists of her going to her yoga class. She does some garden work almost every day. She paints religiously because that's her passion, her thing. And then she does some chores around the house as needed. On the day of the happening, I left the house early due to a business meeting scheduled for out of state. I took a flight to Louisiana from Georgia to get to the meeting, and the plan was to come back home the next day. So the meeting goes well. I spent the night at a hotel, then came home around 3 in the afternoon the following day. Megan, my wife, wasn't home when I got there. So I opened my travel bag to take the old clothes to the laundry room, and right next to the washing machine, I see that my tools have been left on the floor. It's no biggie, but this is a rare sight in our house. You see, Megan is extremely orderly, so much so that we had many fights at the early stage of our marriage. Today we're fine because we've managed to find a nice middle ground, but the point is, it's very unlike her to leave things around on the floor. In any event, I went straight to my office after that and found my laptop on the desk, still on, and this is important, it was logged in. My wife doesn't have the password for my laptop. I don't ask for her password and she doesn't ask for mine. So how was she able to log in? And why would she feel the need to do so? I wanted to call her and ask, but didn't want this to turn into an argument. So I decided to wait for her to come home and also use that time to be less emotional and confrontational. This is something that I've learned from my wife as well. Don't talk when you're angry. It's a simple rule that works every time. So Megan comes home about an hour later, and right as she enters the house, she says, "Honey, did you fix the leak in the laundry room?" I obviously had no idea what she was talking about. "Babe, I just got home. What is this leak that you're talking about?" I say. Megan laughs and responds, "Honey, there's no shame in that you're no plumber. Call a professional if you can't fix it on your own." She was joking, of course, but not the part about her telling me to fix the leak. I go, "Wife, I'm not kidding. I just got home about an hour ago. I saw some tools laying around on the floor, and I also found that my laptop had been logged in by someone. I thought it was you who turned it on, and I also thought it was you who left the tools on the floor. I was gonna ask you about those things, but you were telling me that I was home earlier in the day when I was actually still on a plane. I sat her down and began talking. Turns out, Megan saw me come home last night at around 11 p.m. I normally call her in the morning when I stay overnight on business trips, but I didn't on this day because I had woken up late, and by then she would have been in her yoga class already. She swears that it was me, and I believe her because there's no reason for her to lie, but also because my laptop had been logged in. I showed her the proof that I was on a plane in the morning by showing her a short video I had recorded while on flight. The timestamp is on the screen, and she knows there's absolutely no reason for me to lie. We had both established that neither of us were lying, and that meant for about 10 hours from last night to this morning, there were two of me in this world, one in Louisiana and another in Georgia. To say that we were shocked would be an egregious understatement. But what made the experience truly dreadful is the fact that the other me had made love with my wife. Why is that so horrible, do you ask? After all, that's technically me, right? Well, if you can't see the tragedy in that, how would it sound if I told you that my wife is pregnant, and because of the timing of the events which unfolded, there's no way for me to ever find out which me is the father? I don't know where the other me has disappeared to, but maybe that's not so important. I've got no clue how these things happen and how it's even possible. But forget that. My only wish right now is that I'll never cross paths again with the other me. My wife and I are trying to work things out, but our relationship hasn't been the same since. This is all because of me, literally and technically.